Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. TJ, you know, I'm feeling a little bit lost in time today. I'm not sure. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I don't know whether this moment already happened, is about to happen, or is happening now. I can't imagine why I'm feeling that way. Any thoughts?
It might be all three. You know, like we humans are locked into chronological time, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes.
Or it could have something to do with the movie we're about to discuss.
And what movie is that?
That would be Arrival, the 2016 science fiction movie.
Yeah, I got to say, I love this movie. I loved it in the theater. I sat there mesmerized. I've seen it, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times since. Love it every time. Find something new and interesting in it every time. It makes me cry every time. And so I'm looking forward to talking about it. So, folks, if you have not seen Arrival, I don't know that we could really spoil the plot necessarily with this, because it's a pretty darn complicated plot, at least at first watching. I think once you get it, it's a lot easier. Once you've seen it, I think that a rewatch, really shows you the power of the movie and the quality of the filmmaking. But anyway, we do give away spoilers, so go watch the movie and then come back if you have not seen it already. But TJ, tell us about the movie Arrival.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, spoilers are plenty in this. Cannot recommend this movie highly enough. Check it out. And our episode today, we're going to be looking at the main character, who we believe is a navigating 5. So Arrival, the inciting incident in Arrival is 12 UFOs show up at various points around the globe. It's not clear why they're here or what they want. They do not fire. They do not invade. They just hover. So governments from all over the world scramble to figure out what to do, and one of them is the U.S. And they bring in Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams, who is a university professor specializing in languages. And she's brought in to try and communicate with the aliens on board one of these hovering UFOs, which is in Montana. And she's paired with a physicist named Ian Donnelly, played by Jeremy Renner. And they're brought in, they're prepared, and then pretty quickly they're brought into the UFO itself, where they are brought face to face with 2 large 7-limbed aliens, roughly a little bit bigger than an elephant each. And the humans come to call them heptapods, referring to the fact that they have 7 limbs. And it's Banks' job to try and communicate with them. They do make sounds, but she eventually decides to communicate with them by writing, and she learns their writing, which shows up through circles made of sentient black smoke, is the best description I can come up with. And her purpose is to figure out why they're here, and she eventually does. I'm skipping a lot, but she eventually figures out. They reveal that they are here to impart technology that will help humans. And what she deciphers is that the technology is their language, which allows humans to experience time the way the heptapods do, which is outside of linear chronology. And this provides a big reveal late in the movie. So this is the big spoiler. If you haven't watched it, this is your last chance to go back and watch it before I spoil it. Banks' story from the start is intercut with scenes of her and a little girl who we learn is her daughter and who dies of an unnamed disease. This initially seems like backstory, but eventually we find out that these are scenes from her future. She and Donnelly will get together. They will have a daughter who will die. She sees all of this as she's interacting with the heptapods and chooses to go through with it. And then also she decodes the heptapods' elaborate message, publishes it in a book, and becomes the ambassador for that. And presumably this allows the human race to enter a whole new paradigm in which we all experience the past, present, future simultaneously, leading to, I would assume, world peace and the repair of climate change and a new dawn of heaven on earth.
This is the day they arrived.
The object touched down 40 minutes ago.
Mama, what's going to happen?
I don't know.
Dr. Banks, you're at the top of everyone's list when it comes to translations. You hear any words?
Is that...
Yes.
Am I the only one having trouble saying aliens?
So what do they look like?
You'll see soon enough.
They need to see me.
Dr. Banks?
Now that's a proper introduction.
More objects have landed around the world.
It's their language.
Got 21 hours before they start global war.
They're not our enemy.
We need to talk to them.
It's more complicated than that.
How is it more complicated?
Are you dreaming in their language? What does it say?
Weapon.
So how do we clarify their intentions?
I go back in.
What is she doing? You are committing an act of treason.
Do you trust me?
Yeah, so it's basically your typical boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back sort of story, right? So,
Very predictable, very cliched.
yeah, it's one of those movies where when you're watching it, you're wondering, for the first time, you're wondering, okay, what's with the little girl, right? And why is she popping up? And then when it all for me the first time it tied together, right? I get it. Oh, that's what's going on right now. I figured it out, and that sort of thing. But it can be confusing, right? So you really do have to pay attention to the narrative. And like I said already, rewatching it for me was probably even more joyful than it didn't feel like, well, I know how this ends, right? But you start to notice, oh, okay, ooh, okay, that's why that's happening, or oh, that's what that look on her face means, right? So there are so many nuances and subtleties you get upon rewatching the movie that it really does make it worthwhile. So again, if you haven't seen it and you haven't stopped listening to go watch it yet, I'd say watch it twice, to really, really enjoy it. Before we start getting into dissecting the type, the instinctual bias, that sort of thing in this, TJ, as I was watching it this most recent time, two directors came to mind, and I'm curious about your thoughts. First of all, we've talked about Denis Villeneuve in the past on the podcast, and we're both big fans of his work. I just love his stuff. And I was struck by how five-ish he is, right? Something we talked about, and how fiveness permeates the movies. And two directors that just I could not think about during this watching were Christopher Nolan, right, who often plays with time. Okay, so if you go back to Memento, right, and we talked about this with the Batman episode, he plays with time, Tenet, Memento, Inception for sure, those sort of things. But the other one I kept thinking about this time was Terrence Malick, right, particularly the flashbacks. And they just seemed so Terrence Malick-y in the way they were framed and kind of the from out of left field feel they had to them. And it reminded me a lot of his later, more obscure work, starting kind of with The Tree of Life. I don't know, any thoughts or reaction to that?
Oh, absolutely. In both cases, in both of these directors, we've talked about, probably offline, as being fives.
Right.
So there's... In this movie, as well as those, there's a lot of patience.
Yes.
And just the setup of this movie, aliens arrive on Earth, usually does not result in a quiet, slow, meditative film.
Right.
Whereas that is very much the five way.
Yeah.
The heptapods are creepy. They're not cute.
Right.
They're intimidating. They do not look like just humans. They don't have the physiology of humans. They're not relatable in that way.
Right.
And much more plausible than the kind of aliens you would see in Star Trek and Star Wars for that reason.
Exactly right. They don't look like humans with pointy ears or something like that, right?
Right. They're not sexy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And the artfulness of particularly Terrence Malick, Tree of Life is a great example of that.
Yeah.
How it's visual poetry in a lot of ways.
Yes.
The scenes between, which we eventually learn are flash forwards, between Louise Banks and her daughter are very much like that. They feel like memory, but like emotional memory.
Yes.
And dreamlike and obscure and emotion, like loving, but also disturbing, and this incredible cocktail of what it means to be a human being.
Right, right. And especially as she's kind of figuring out how to make sense of them, right? Because at first she doesn't have any reaction to them, right? You see the what again seem like flashbacks in the beginning, but she doesn't really have reaction to them. But kind of one of the premises of the movie is when we speak a language, it shapes how we see the world. And so as she is learning their language, she starts to understand more how they view, the universe. And she starts to experience the world like they do, and that includes these asynchronicities of experience. And you see her starting to wrestle with this, like, what is going on? Am I dreaming? What are these? What's with this little girl? Sort of thing. And then the more fluid she gets with the language, the more it all starts to make sense to her, and the more she really sees it and understands what's going on. So really, really well constructed and thoughtful, I think. So let's start off, TJ. What was five-ish about this movie for you?
Yeah, well, we talked about the five-ishness of the movie itself to a certain degree. Also, the five-ishness of the main character, building exactly on what you were saying, she has a very flat affect.
Yeah.
So that's part of the cleverness of the way the movie's put together, is what seemed to us like flashbacks about having lost a child. None of that clashes with her presentation that we learn later. She's not grieving.
Right.
She's just a 5.
Right.
Like she's just very straight-faced. She's very unemotional, even on the day that aliens land on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, and all throughout the movie, she's calling for rationality, right? Let's not jump to conclusions here. It could also mean this, or it could be that, etc. So very much a 5 thing. I was reading about the production design as well, and the production designer said that he wanted everything to look like a classroom in the program. So like we first meet her in her classroom, and behind her is this giant screen, and behind that, behind the giant screen is a big screen TV that she opens up, and they watch the possible ending of the world on whenever the aliens first arrive. Her home, where she goes to it, when you first see her in her home, there are these big windows looking out over a lake. And the designer said, I even wanted that to look like a board in a classroom. And then, of course, every section every part with the aliens was this big screen that they're communicating with, or this big sort of glass-like wall. And so, again, not every 5 is an academic, and not every 5 is even all that bright, but it's often what we think of when it comes to 5s, right, is this learning that's happening. So that's, part of what's going on behind the scenes in a very nuanced way.
Yeah, 5s usually have a deep expertise on a subject of their own choosing.
Yeah.
And something Russ Hudson, who's a 5, would often add to that is that it's usually a subject that has no practical value of any kind. They didn't get into this because there's money there. They got into it simply because it interests them, and then they deep dive.
Yeah.
So something they don't clarify in this movie, she's an expert on languages. How many languages does she know?
Right.
We see just the first moment when she's about to lecture her class, and it's about the history of the Portuguese language and how it differs from other Romance languages and why. Later in the movie, we see that she speaks fluent Mandarin.
Right.
Utterly unrelated languages.
Right.
So again, just teasing us with that. Like, does she speak 10 languages? Dozens? Does she speak dead languages? Like, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. They also mention Farsi, because there's that scene in the beginning where Forrest Whitaker, who plays Colonel Weber, who recruits her to as part of this project, comes to her and, kind of wants to recruit her. She puts some conditions on it. He disagrees. He's about to go talk to the next person. And she says, ask him what the Farsi word for war means. And
Sanskrit.
Sanskrit. Okay, you're right. It's Sanskrit. I apologize. So it's so we don't know if she actually speaks Farsi or not. But
she translated. Like, that's part of the backstory.
Oh, that's
worked for Secret Service before. Right. So there you go. So we got Farsi, we got Mandarin, we got Portuguese. They're from entirely different language families.
And Sanskrit, right?
And Sanskrit. She's fluent enough in each.
Yes.
That she's an expert on them.
Yeah.
And then she just, when they come back and they say Danvers said that the translation for war is this, she disputes it. Right.
Which starts the kind of 5-ish, or doesn't start, but reinforces the 5-ishness, because one of the things we see about her throughout this is that she's plain spoken. Right. And she doesn't back down from people. She doesn't, cower intellectually. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. She just states things very matter of fact. So when she tells, Weber that no, it means the desire for another cow, she's just stating a fact, in kind of a little bit of a jabbing way, but not so much. There's the scene where she addresses the Jeremy Renner character, Ian, and says, why do I have to listen to him about the CIA guy who's sitting right across the table from her, right? So again, it's this contempt. It reminds me of kind of the Social Network, where the Mark Zuckerberg character is just showing kind of contempt for people. Not nearly that extreme, but again, this is the kind of thing we often see with fives is, look, here are the facts. And there's this implied comma dummy, right? Behind it, right? So
if you're not smart enough to get these facts, then why am I wasting my time with you?
That's right. That's right. So the type 5, we talk about as striving to feel detached, and it's this desire to create this sort of emotional buffer between ourselves and the world, because 5s often find the emotions and messiness of life to be overwhelming, right? And a lot of times people think that 5s are insensitive. I think actually that they're probably a little bit hypersensitive, and so they have to protect themselves through this buffer and through this detachment. And there's often this real tenderness underneath them and this real sweetness that they have. And I think we see that in her for sure. But again, tell me what else is 5-ish about this character to you?
Well, along those lines, 5s are famously private. They have feelings. They keep them to themselves. So there's one scene when it's like deep into the process of they started to learn to communicate with the heptapods, and she asks Ian Donnelly if he asks her if she's dreaming in their language. And she says, I've had a few dreams, but I don't think this makes me unfit to do this job. And then what we see, and she does not communicate in the slightest, she has a vision of a heptapod right there in the room with her. The implication is this is heavily part of her consciousness by this point, but she does not betray it to even the person she's closest with, who she will eventually marry and have a child with.
Yeah.
That is for me and me alone.
Yeah. Interesting. What else? Anything else 5-ish?
Insight and intuition. So that's a big thing that she does. Is it isn't so much if this, then this. It's more like these intuitive leaps, which are more what 5s are famous for. So she's the one that comes up with the plan for engaging the heptapods through writing rather than through spoken communication. She realizes that the heptapods' writing does not correlate with the sounds that they make. And she figures out that the technology is their language, which shifts users' perception of times. Each of these is a massive leap. And she makes them successively, and the plot hinges on her making these leaps.
Yeah. This, one of the things about intuition, mature intuition, there's a difference that psychologists would make between immature intuition and mature intuition. Mature intuition comes from a foundation of deep knowledge. So you have to really understand something to have useful intuitions about it. And this is why 5s are often intuitive in this sense, when they're more mature and healthy, because they've done so much study and so much, taken in so much information and processed things and struggled with certain problems, right? It's the classic Archimedes thing. Was it Archimedes? Eureka?
Yeah.
I found it, right? He wasn't just, he didn't just pop into a bathtub one day and then come up with, the laws of volume displacement. He'd been wrestling with this topic for, a long, long time. And then something clicked when he stepped into that bathtub and the water spilled out. And that's why he said, I got it. But he had to do the work first in order to get there. And she has these insights about language because that's what she does, man. I mean, all the time. That's what she's thinking about. So.
She's a world expert on this. She has done the work. So that she's got this fertile ground of her mind to just gift her these massive leaps.
Yeah.
I recently rewatched The Queen's Gambit, and the same thing in that. Beth Harmon, the young chess champion, reads endless books on chess theory and the history of different chess masters and plays games and replays games and studies it. Whereas when she's playing, and they even discuss this, she is very intuitive as she plays. Yeah. But it's on a foundation of incredible expertise rather than just like, I just learned the rules and I'm going to do what feels right.
Yeah. So just note to listener, whenever you encounter someone who relies on their intuition in lieu of knowledge about something, their intuition is probably crap. So hold on to your wallet and back away. Okay. So One of my little pet peeves here. All right. Any more about fiveness before we move on to navigating?
Yeah, just this isn't so much centered on the character of Louise Banks, but in the movie in general, which I think fits in with us believing Denis Villeneuve, the directors of Five, messing with fundamental aspects of reality is very much a Five thing. Not that Fives own this, but you see this in a number of different stories created by Fives. Like Philip K. Dick came up with the idea of what if your memories aren't real? What if they were implanted? And that became a major story point in Blade Runner and in Total Recall. In this, first of all, the movie is a puzzle that doesn't even seem to be a puzzle. The fact that it's a puzzle is kept hidden from the viewer until late in the movie. That's messing with the form of just telling stories. The encounters with the aliens feel psychedelic. Russ Huston's talked about how different types will often do a drug that makes them feel more like themselves and pin psychedelics on Fives. Just to diverge something about myself, I've done psychedelics sparingly in both recreational and therapeutic settings. And the kind of messing with perception that happens when you're on psychedelics was very vividly on my mind as I was rewatching this movie. Like there's a scene late in the movie when she does a solo encounter with the heptapods and kind of seems to be lifted out of herself and is surrounded by white mist. And it felt like something out of a psychedelic trip, as well as the profound shift in the human species that the conclusion of this movie represents. So if humanity was able to learn to perceive time outside of chronology, that would be as significant as humans learning to use tools or developing language in the first place or developing agriculture or developing consciousness. That kind of like major paradigm shift in a direction nobody had predicted. Also very Five.
You know, and what's interesting about that, because I thought a lot about that point because the premise of this is, you know, at the end, she begins her relationship with Ian, who played by Jeremy Renner, who already knowing that they are going to have a child who will die and that she will end up they will end up getting divorced. He will leave her because she reveals to him information that he wasn't ready to hear, and gets angry at her for knowing this in advance. Now, I think it was about the death of their daughter that, you know, she revealed. I couldn't tell if they ever actually made that point.
They don't say it, but that's very much the implication.
Right. But what I notice at the end, especially that scene where they hug at the end, it's the first time they have any physical contact that I can recall. And she hugs him and she whispers in his ear, "I forgot how good it feels to hold you." Right. And what I kind of took away from that is that this kind of perception would actually drive us to appreciate the moment even more. Right. And that's the lesson for her, right? I know how this is all going to play out, but I'm still going to do it. And I am going to live it even more fully because I know how this works out, and I know how precious this moment is, and I know that it's, you know, not coming back and all these sort of things. So I found it not, again, detaching from life, but experiencing it ever more deeply, which was the key takeaway here, which we would not think of about a Five necessarily.
Although, what is the virtue of Type 5?
The virtue of Type 5 is, remind me, I'm drawing a blank now.
Non-attachment.
Non-attachment, yeah, absolutely, right? So, yeah, say more about that.
So this is very much that. I mean, I do not have children, much less I've never had a children who suffered or died. But from what I have gleaned, just from being curious about the world, that is the number one worst experience somebody can go through.
Yeah. No.
So to know that she's going to do this, to know that it will break her heart profoundly, and to do it anyway, marks an extreme point of growth for any character, but particularly a Five, who, as you said, their default is detachment. Right. Is like, I don't want that. I don't want emotional engagement because I don't want to be hurt. Because, as you said, it's not Fives are insensitive. They're incredibly sensitive. So that's why there's all this protection. Yeah. And when the scenes that we see of her and her daughter, especially when her daughter's well, she is loving and playful and engaged. She is a good parent. She's not detached in the slightest.
Right.
So what non-attachment means, her choice to engage in spite of what she knows, is she is treasuring every moment all the more that she gets to have with her daughter because she knows that it's not going to last, which is very much the lesson of non-attachment is none of this lasts.
Yes. So experience it fully now. Don't try to cling to it. Don't try to reject it, but just be there fully as much as you can. So
savor it.
Yeah.
Be with it, which is a lesson for all of us, but especially for fives.
Yeah.
Because we're only here for so long. So take it while you can.
You made reference to Philip K. Dick earlier, and I've never been a science fiction reader. Okay, I just it's just not a genre I've ever gotten into, and I used to kind of dismiss it. It's like, I'm not interested in that stuff. Lately, I see it as a big hole in my education and my experience, because what I have come to see, the more I understand good science fiction work, is that it raises the most interesting questions, not just about the universe, but about the human condition, right? As you said earlier, right? So, what if these memories are implanted? What does that mean about me and who I am, etc.? And it's interesting to me as I think about people like Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein. I don't know this really well, but they all seem kind of five-ish to me, right? I mean, I'd be surprised, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the great science fiction writers are fives. And it's a way of plumbing the depths of experience at about as far a remove as you can get, right? I mean, because it's like, I'm talking about space creatures here, and that sort of thing very often. So it's the ability to put something really, really human under a microscope in what seems like an abstract way, but often has all the more power because of it.
I'd agree completely, and a name I would add to that list enthusiastically, and he's one of my favorite writers, even though I too don't read much science fiction, William Gibson. Whose novels never involve extraterrestrials.
Right.
So he was much more about how does computer technology affect the human mind? And again, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be awake? Are you in the virtual world or are you in the physical world? How do these things interact and interplay? How is the world, the weirdness of the world as it is, what does that reveal about us?
Right.
And how that intersects with technology. So I'd recommend him wholeheartedly to anybody.
All right. Let's move on to navigating. Okay.
Navigating.
Again, watching this movie, I could not see how anything about it was not related to navigating, quite frankly, right? So the navigating domain, again, in the Enneagram literature, people think of it as a social instinct and, a need to be connected to people or a group or something like that. That's not, first of all, that's not really what it's about. It's about understanding the group. It's about understanding the other. It's about making sense of people and the way they are in the world, and observing, listening, probing, all of these things. And this whole movie is about that. I mean, it is just, I'm trying to understand these creatures from another, place. I am trying to interact with 12 other countries, okay, all speaking different languages and pursuing things differently and, seeing the world differently, right? Again, the premise being that our language shapes the way we think about things. So you've got these 12 different actors all thinking about things differently. In the team in the U.S. in Montana, you have you have her who's a linguist, a female university professor linguist, type 5. You have Jeremy Remmer, who I believe was an astrophysicist, or
just a physicist.
Okay, so he was a scientist who was a physicist. I'm talking about kind of the main characters here, other than Abbott and Costello, because I don't know what their Enneagram types were, but.
The heptapods, by the way.
The heptapods, yes.
Not the comedians.
Right. And the Forrest Whitaker colonel, and then the CIA agent. Again, all very different worldviews, very different personalities, and she had to navigate all those in order to be, successful in what she was doing. So I just, for me, this movie was all navigating stuff. Thoughts?
Well, the very fact that she works in an academic institution shows that she is able to work within that system. And something that I find, it's not the one and only thing I look at, but when somebody is able to work within an institution, without shaping it in their own image, that's often the sign that they're a navigating type.
Yeah.
So as an academic, what you have to do is understand, okay, what's the hierarchy here and what are the procedures that I have to abide by in order to be hired back for the next year and to get tenure and so on.
Right. There's a saying I heard one time that the politics are greatest where the stakes are lowest, and that universities are an extremely political place. And so it would support your premise that there's a whole lot of navigators there, right? Because navigators,
if you last, then yeah.
Right. And navigators have a tendency to be kind of politically oriented people, not talking about, focused on governmental politics or something, but just focused on the workings of the group in general, which is what politics is.
And along those lines, her being an expert on languages and communication and being able to apply it is a brilliant analogy for navigating in the first place. Of here's an expert who gets brought in to decipher obscure messages for the government or to communicate this to students who want to learn about why Portuguese is different than other Romance languages and such. It's very much like, I know how to go from group to group, and I will take you there with me if you want.
Yeah. Another navigating piece of this was when they interpret things they interpret what the heptapods are saying, and they pick up the word weapon, right? Because what the heptapods are offering them is a tool or a gift or something, but it's being interpreted as a weapon. And that causes everybody to sort of have a meltdown, right? The CIA guy who, and the military people, and, they're thinking, okay, they just, they got a gun, right? Right. So we have to start acting accordingly. And not only do, the Chinese in particular start to become belligerent, but you start to see rioting in the streets, and they all start to shut down their connections, right? Up to this point, all 12 of the countries who were working on this problem, and it was 12 countries because there were 12 spaceships that came down, for lack of a better word. I thought of them as lima beans as I was watching the movie. They were like big black lima beans. But they start to retract, right? So the thing that the navigating domain, pushes for is open communication, right? Or extended communication. Whereas when the preserving thing kicks in and takes over, people start to withdraw. They start to pull in. They start to shut the gates and, man the walls and prepare for, defense. And so you started to see her as a navigator, and probably the Jeremy Renner character as well. I saw him as a navigating 7. We could talk about that in a bit, but the two of them are saying, no, wait, we have to keep communication here, right? This is the way we're going to solve this. And that's exactly what a navigator would think, right? They wouldn't say, okay, it's time to go to war. They'd say, no. We need to get clarity on this. We need to discuss this. We need to understand where everybody's coming from. So you start to see that conflict between the navigating bias and this sort of defensive stance.
And understandably, how many people wouldn't be terrified if aliens landed?
Right.
No matter how benevolent, or in this case, neutral they seemed. Like, it's very easy for just that preserving sense to kick up and be like, I'm threatened.
Yeah.
Stop listening.
Yeah. There was also something in there. So when they finally convince the others to, when they're trying to convince the others to share what they know with the other countries, there's resistance to it, right? And it doesn't happen. We can talk about the plot point in a moment that makes that happen. But in game theory, there's what's called the tit for tat strategy, right? You're nice to me, I'm nice to you. You're not nice to me, I'm not nice to you. Okay. But what they find, what game theory says is the most successful strategy is that I be nice first. And if you're not nice to me, then, okay, I get defensive and I'm not nice back, but I give it some time and I try again. Right? That's the best strategy. Okay. And then if the other person says, okay, well, we had this little kind of conflict here, but that person's reaching out, maybe I will open up as well. Okay. And so if they do, it can drive the relationship forward. If they don't, then the original person can say, okay, what was the George Bush quote? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, well, we won't be fooled again, right?
As the old saying goes, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was an interesting example of the tit for tat strategy, which again is a very navigating thing.
I think that can nicely bring us into Navigating 5.
Yeah. So Navigating 5. What was Navigating 5 about this for you, TJ?
Well, first of all, she connects through knowledge. So as we've already talked about, that's her gig. That's what got her the gig. That's why she is here. And in the end, she becomes the ambassador for the heptapod's gift to the world. We see her lecturing. Her book has become a bestseller. So that is very much like, I have this expertise that nobody has. And at least in a healthy 5, Navigating 5, I'm going to share it effectively. And communicating effectively is something that we see her do a number of times. So her military liaison is Colonel Weber, played by Forrest Whitaker, who is, as you would expect, a gruff, no-nonsense military guy. And in more than one instance, grills her on, why are you doing this? First of all, he has no plan. It's up to her and Ian Donnelly to come up with a plan.
Right.
And so she does, and then communicates it. And in multiple instances, he says, why? He says, and she'll respond, well, there's this, there's this, there's this, and there's this. And she'll explain it in a way that is gettable, it's airtight, it doesn't condescend, and it satisfies a skeptical military superior when the stakes couldn't possibly be higher.
Right. Right. Yeah. With the Navigating 5, there's this sort of conflict between a withdrawn affect with a need for connection. Okay. And it's a need to be around people. It's a need to understand the world. It's a need to be out in the world, but to do it in a way that is kind of reserved. And she tends to be that way. Very often Navigating 5s look like 9s or get mistyped as 9s because they like people and they want to be with people, but there's this easiness to them. They tend to be not as direct as the preserving 5 or the transmitting 5. They tend to be a little softer around the edges, although again, she's no pushover, right? She's direct, but they're really, other than that, why do we have to talk to this guy? There really aren't any mean moments that we might see in a transmitting 5 or a preserving 5 under this kind of stressful situation. So there's that piece of it. There's also just sort of this kind of gentleness to her that I don't know that I would call it warmth necessarily, right? I mean, you see that in the scenes with her daughter and all that sort of thing, but there's this gentle understatedness to her and almost a warmth that, again, is kind of a signature of the Navigating 5.
Well, jumping ahead a little bit of how would this story have been different with a preserving or transmitting 5? That was one of the thoughts I had. If that character was a transmitting 5, she would probably have outright arguments.
Yes.
With the people in her environment of like, you don't get it because you are fundamentally incapable of getting it. And here's this elaborate explanation as to why. And then, of course, just make herself a big enemy.
Yes. Yeah, so you can think of a character like Benedict Cumberbatch in the Imitation Game, right? Of just this,
or
just
in
this,
Sherlock.
In Sherlock, absolutely right. It's this kind of abrasive, in your face, you're stupid. It's Mark Zuckerberg in the Social Network of just, I just have no sensitivity whatsoever. Now, again, not all transmitting 5s are going to be like this, but it's this, I'm just saying this, you're stupid and ugly. And, look, don't blame me. That's the way your mother made you,
It's
kind
just
of thing.
a fact.
Right? Yeah, it's just a fact. So there tends to be this more aggressive and more, I'm super smart and you're stupid. That's how it would look and a transmitting 5 in this kind of character. And there is this really neat scene where Ian and Louise are talking with each other, and they know that they're the smartest people there, right? And I forget exactly what reference they make, how do we deal with these people or something like that. But it's not aggressive in the same way, right? So it's a more gentle sort of quality. I don't know. What about preserving 5? What?
Preserving 5 might not have been that different. One thought that I had is they might not be findable in the first place. They might not be working for an institution and be a known expert. They might just be some quiet file clerk with a head full of dead languages that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah. When the colonel comes to see if they want to get involved in this, it might be like, Montana. Living in tents, the dark. I'm not so sure, right? So, I'm good.
Much less going into the UFO, even the first time.
Right.
Much less after it has been bombed. That happens late.
Right.
And she defies orders and goes in by herself, having no sense. Will the heptapods think that I'm responsible? Am I in danger? But goes in because the mission, like a Preserving 5 might have gone in, but they might have erred on the side of safety at that point.
Right. So our other category is other navigating 5s. What do you have for that?
Well, we've talked about a bunch of navigating 5s on previous episodes of the podcast. So if any of these sparks interest to anybody, we've got an episode that covers the movie Annihilation. The lead character in that, Lena, played by Natalie Portman, very much a navigating 5. Andy Dufresne, the Tim Robbins character in Shawshank Redemption. Thelonious Monk Ellison, Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction. Jackson Lamb, Gary Oldman on Slow Horses. Some we haven't talked about. Tom Hagen, Robert Duvall in The Godfather, Parts 1 and 2. Abed Nadir on Community, who connects through his encyclopedic knowledge of pop culture. Lord Varys, the Spider on Game of Thrones. Not one we've talked about, but I think he's very much that. J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer. Roman J. Israel Esquire, played by Denzel Washington.
That I'm going to have to take your word for, because I can't ever imagine myself watching a movie with that title on it.
There you go. Yeah. Screenwriters, take note. Give your movie a good title. This movie's title is Roman J. Esquire Israel. Yeah. Roman J. Israel Esquire. A terrible title that I can't even say when I'm reading it off my notes. And a movie that bombed, probably because of
the stupid title. Yeah.
We got Coach Beard, Brendan Hunt on Ted Lasso, and Tom Reagan in Miller's Crossing, played by Gabriel Byrne.
My favorite movie. Good. Yeah, that's a great list. Were there any women in there? Did you mention any women?
Lena in Annihilation.
Oh, okay, right.
But that's about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. I also want to do a shout out to the piece of music. This is 2 movies in a row that were, because we did Batman last time. But when we talked about the Preserving 8, I mentioned a piece of music called On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter, used throughout this movie as well in the beginning and then in some of the more sentimental scenes. I think it's just one of the most beautiful pieces of music, I've heard used in films, and it's been in 2 of the 4 films that we've talked about, and I doubt we'll ever talk about it again. But you can find it on Spotify or wherever you get your music and listen to the whole thing. Great piece of music. And other characters. So there weren't. There was one other point I wanted to make. We've been talking about 5-ness. One of the plot points here was fairly small. It was around conspiracy thinking, right? As the world starts to fall apart, there are a couple of the soldiers. It's interesting. There's this one soldier who they, highlight, briefly a couple of times. And the first time he's listening, he's on the phone speaking to a woman who's losing her mind, it's so dangerous, you need to get out of there, sort of thing. And his affect is very flat, very 5-ish. And he's just saying, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And then you see him a little bit later where one of his fellow soldiers is watching some conspiracy theorist on the computer talking about, all these horrible things that are going to happen. And again, he's just kind of laying there flatly and not really paying much attention to it. But then when he hears the word weapon, because he's one of the people up in the chamber or wherever it is that they're interacting with these folks, then he starts, all of a sudden, he sort of comes alive, right? He's like, no, they said weapon, right? This is a problem. So this conspiracy thinking had kind of taken hold of him and shifted his perception, and then he's one of the people that tries to sabotage and blow up the lima bean. I find, even though we're talking about navigating fives, I find that fives tend to be highly susceptible to conspiracy thinking and wild, wild sort of pseudo-science ideas, right? Particularly transmitting fives, even more so than regular fives. And this is a good example of that. And it's an example of how this hypothesis spinning that is going on in fives can cause them to go down real rabbit holes of things, right? So just something for my five friends to pay attention to, right? Don't be dragged down the rabbit hole of crazy. And just because somebody's a five doesn't mean everything they're saying is, real smart sometimes. Okay.
Just to add to that, I would say fives have a thirst for discovering the secret architecture underpinning what the rest of us perceive as the whole picture.
Yes.
And that can very much make conspiracy theories attractive of like, there's actually been aliens all along. And that's why these great monuments have been built. Or there are secret villainous societies at the wheel and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world rejects this, but initiates know.
Yes. Yes. All right, great. TJ, anything we haven't talked about that we should cover?
Yeah, any of the other characters you want to type?
So the Ian character played by Jeremy Renner, I think he was a navigating seven. He had this, the navigating seven is kind of not as manic as we tend to think of the seven. It's not a Robin Williams kind of character. It's more, but he's just seemed to have this kind of positivity and lightness to him and this quick mind and curiosity. I see a lot of sevens in the advanced sciences, physics, different kind of technology and that sort of thing, because sevens like puzzles, right? They love excitement. They love to figure things out. It's stimulating and exciting, and the advanced sciences give them an opportunity to do that. So I see lots and lots of sevens in the sciences. The Forrest Whitaker character seems pretty darn eight-ish to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts or observations on either of those before we get to the last one.
Yeah, Forrest Whitaker, I think, could be a five in real life. He often plays obscure weirdos. But in this, very much an in-command military man.
Yeah.
An eight.
One of my other favorite movies is Ghost Dog, the Jim Jarmusch movie, where he plays very much a five-ish sort of character.
Well, kind of nine-ish, too.
Kind of nine-ish, yeah. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, we might revisit that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah. All right. Jim Jarmusch strikes me as very five-ish in his movie making, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, final character, I think the only one I sort of had a read on was the CIA agent played by Michael Stolberg. Seemed pretty six-ish to me, kind of as one would expect from a stereotypical CIA person, suspicious, paranoid, right? Looking for, all the dangers and that sort of thing. I don't know. Any reaction to that?
I wouldn't be surprised if he's a six in real life. He certainly plays a great six in the Coen Brothers movie, Serious Man. Not one of their better known movies, but a very quiet film that followed No Country for Old Men.
Yeah. Tough not to get lost in that wake, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that movie, Eric.
It's a hidden gem.
Okay, good. All right. Last thoughts, TJ, or did we hit it all?
Just to reiterate, this is an amazing film. Absolutely check it out, whether you want to learn about navigating fives or not.
Yeah. Nominated for 8 Academy Awards. I had forgotten how well received this movie was, right? It got incredible reviews. It was, again, nominated for all sorts of awards, and it was very successful, too. It made $200 million at the box office, which is big for a thoughtful, grown-up movie like this, right? There was one explosion, but it wasn't an explosion movie, right? There was not it was
No
not
chase scenes, no gunfights.
It was the kind of movie that, you wish they made more of, right? Just a grown-up, adult, thoughtful, beautiful, moving movie to watch. I can't recommend this one high enough. So,
Not based on a franchise, not based
Right.
on any intellectual property, just
actually, it was based on a short story. Yeah.
but not like a well-known
Right.
comic book or something like
Right.
that.
And apparently changed, significantly from the original story too. So,
Cool.
but yeah. All right, great. Well, TJ, this was fun. I really enjoyed
Awesome.
talking about this movie, and hope more people will go out and see and experience it. And we will see you next time.
See you next time, folks.
So long.